Hello. Hi, everybody. Let's just give it a moment to let some folks join, and then we're going to get started. You ready, Jay? Jordan? Let's go. So welcome to Medley Moments. We are really super excited about continuing with this series of conversations. As I've said before, I'll say it now and I'll say it again. I am super blessed to have the opportunity to engage with people who I learn from, can engage with, who are provide thought-provoking ideas and experiences. And I think that 100% describes the conversation I'm going to have today with Jordan Taylor. Jordan is my co-founder of Medley. She is the CEO of Medley. And honestly, the origin and the idea of Medley came from Jordan while she was at business school. When we talked about our next conversation for Medley Moments, it was suggested that Jordan and I have another conversation. And I said, oh, we just did one of those a few months ago. Actually, I think, Jordan, how long ago was it? 2 or 3 years, maybe? Or even longer. It was probably the beginning of COVID. We were thinking about the business, where we were headed, hopefully headed in the business. And so it is certainly time for us to explore another Medley Moments with Jordan. So Jordan, let me just start with a somewhat different question. I usually ask folks to tell the story of who they are from the lens that they'd like to tell it. But perhaps we can start with the conversation around, tell me where we are in Medley in this moment, and what has surprised you the most about the journey, and how has change been a thread throughout since we started Medley 6 years ago?
That was a lot of multiple questions at once.
Okay, so you're going to see very quickly the different approaches. I'm like all over the place. That people don't really know exactly what the question is. That's how one converses with Edith. But anyway, answer whatever question of that you think would be most interesting for folks, Jordan.
Well, I think, firstly, the context of the year that we've had in the overall business journey to date, I think, is really interesting and really important. So, you mentioned we've been doing this for 6 years. I can't believe it. Actually, our incorporation date is tomorrow. It is tomorrow. Yep, it's September 24th, 2018. So it is almost exactly 6 years to date in terms of when we made it official and starting off on this adventure. But I will say, the first couple of years, we really spent intentionally iterating on the group coaching methodology and the model itself. Then we spent 2 years working with individuals who came to Medley really looking to invest in their personal professional growth. And then over the past 2 years, which has really begun to accelerate over this past year in 2024, we've shifted our focus to supporting top organizations who are really looking to invest in the connectivity and growth of their leaders. And so it has been 6 years, but there's been a few different distinct chapters in building the business, whereas the first chapter is much more, okay, we have a blank slate. What do we want to create? What do we want to do? The second stage is, okay, how do we actually deliver a group coaching experience that can change people's lives and careers? And then the past 2 years, in particular, is demonstrated by the past year. It's been much more, okay, where's the best home for this to impact Medley, or the best channel for this to impact people, as many people as possible? And so, I feel also very grateful. You started off with gratitude. I feel super grateful to get to, of course, build a company with you, but also to get to build a business that's continuing to grow, that is really supporting and changing how people think about their leadership, their careers, and how companies think about how they can essentially grow and invest in the connectivity of their people.
So you've mentioned a number of times the importance of the learnings that we've captured over the course of the last couple of years from the experiences of working with our partners. And to reiterate, your comment that we have really found an important place in organizations who really understand the significance of investing in their people, specifically people who are in management roles, either newer managers or people who have invested in management and are managers, but understand that it's gotten a lot more complicated. What are the learnings that would be top of mind, Jordan, from our working with partners on what really makes a manager a good manager, and how important it is to understand the context of the leadership development ecosystem that exists at each of our partners' companies?
Absolutely. And I will say the past 5 years, the past year, I think one thing that has been very, very clear is that change is the new normal. Things have been changing quickly, but with what happened in terms of the pandemic and how rapidly that shifted the way people work, and even to what we're experiencing today, where many companies are navigating still the hybrid in-person return to office question. They're navigating a new generation really entering and starting to grow in the workforce. So Gen Z that has very different expectations around how they want to work and how they want to live. And they're also navigating a divisiveness and a divisive environment, both in the US, but honestly, globally, in terms of how people are experiencing the political climate and other aspects of today's current events. And so, I think that has been fascinating for us to really unpack and get glimpses into how different organizations are approaching those changing dynamics. It is absolutely changing how leaders need to show up for their people, because people are expecting different things than they were a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade ago. And you share an anecdote occasionally about how when you were welcoming an intern class, it must have been maybe 10 years ago or so now in your role at Goldman Sachs, where someone said, "Can I bring myself to work?" And you were surprised by the question. Now, that's not even a question. It is a different set of expectations. So, what we've seen that is exciting is that there are companies with CHROs and chief people officers who are really partnering with the CEO to drive towards business transformation. And the CEO recognizes that in order for that to happen, people need to be a core part of the business strategy and the business transformation. And as a result of that, the way that we grow and connect our leaders has to change. It has to shift, given all of the changes that we've just run through and just described. And so that's very motivating. We see a lot of alignment with the companies that we do work with. And we've also seen that the group format that we've developed in itself is really well suited for this type of growth. And that's been also very rewarding on a personal level. Something that I'm grateful for is, I believe deeply personally in what we're doing, but that's only supported by the impact that we're actually having on people who participate in Medley. And the way that our groups work is leaders are actually able to try on and practice skills with different people in the group who all have different styles, who all have different perspectives and strengths and areas that they're working on, which is the reality of what it means to be working today.
So there's a couple of things that are so important to what you're saying, Jordan, in fact, all of it, but I'm just going to highlight a few. One, the concept of your state of mind at work being dramatically different in terms of, your overall existence on the planet is kind of like yesterday's way of existing, i.e., people have a blended reality. Having said that, organizations, whether they're for-profit, nonprofit, large or small, I would say this is true with Medley as well, and we are a very small organization, we have goals, and companies have to achieve those goals, make impact in many instances for clients, for communities, for the organization's purpose. And sometimes that it gets a little cloudy in there. What have we found are the key attributes of being a good manager? I get twisted and exercised when people talk about soft skills as an example, but like unpack that for us. What are the things that historically perhaps were soft skills that now are critical to operating in a human ecosystem?
I like to call them essential human skills, as you and I often discuss. So firstly, I mean, it starts with self-awareness. Having basic self-awareness in terms of how you are impacting others, how you are showing up with others, how and what you can do to affect that is absolutely foundational. From there, and we think of that as, and we describe it at Medley as authentic leadership. So you need to be leading authentically to who you are, and have awareness of what that is and what that means. Second piece of it is really around interpersonal skills. So the ability to understand, read, connect with people is honestly, Edith, you and I have talked about this a lot, and we've talked about this even in the course of your career, given that you spent 20 plus years actually on the sales side in financial services. And you say this sometimes, and I think it always sits with me. You say, I was never a great salesperson. I was just good at listening to people, understanding their problems, and seeing if I could solve them.
It's so nice to hear that some of the things I pontificate have actually sort of stayed in the brain. That's pretty good because you have a big brain. And
I listen sometimes, not often, but sometimes I do listen to you. But that I think really encapsulates what it means to be a leader and to be a commercial leader as well. Because if you are in any type of role in any type of company, I will say the ability for you to make something happen is going to be constrained by your ability to influence and understand people. Because you can be the most incredible at your craft, whatever that might be, whether it's engineering or whether it's financial modeling or whether it's creative design. And at a certain point, if you start building a team and you start running divisions and start, really becoming more of a leader in the organization, you're going to be constrained unless you can mobilize others to action. What is mobilizing others to action? You need to understand what motivates them. You need to understand what their goals are and how the shared goals can actually make things happen. And so, that bucket of interpersonal skills and inclusive leadership is something that we really see. Inclusive, really being able to work with different types of people. And the last bucket, which is also incredibly important, especially given the divisiveness and the broad context that we're operating in now, is really around dynamic leadership. So because things are changing so quickly, and because people are coming from different vantage points, if you're going to be an effective leader now, you need to be able to respond to those different vantage points and adapt your style and really be comfortable with the change that is happening on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So that's something that, we really focus on in the Medley experience, but also on a company level of Medley is something that we've seen is really important for us to identify as we bring people onto the team, create spaces for people to grow around, because it's, absolutely sort of foundational at this point.
So you mentioned dynamic leadership and how at Medley that has been an important thing for all of us, as whether we're peers or co-founders, and of course you as the CEO have, a particularly important mantle. Share with us how you've developed your understanding of what it means to be a dynamic leader and how you define impact as a CEO.
I think this has been one of my biggest areas of focus and growth over the past 6 years. I will say at first, when we started working on Medley and thinking through what it might be, sitting with change, sitting with uncertainty was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. And yet over the past 6 years, plenty of unexpected things have happened.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I don't want to take you off of that train of thought. Sitting with change was difficult. Was the difficulty because you're used to coming up with the right answer and having the answer, or was it unclear what the answer was? What was difficult sitting with change?
I think for me, it was actually building up the confidence that I would be able to respond and take whatever might come at me.
Yes.
So actually understanding my agency in every situation, even if things happen that are out of my control, which not even if, when things happen that are out of my control, because let's be clear, that's the whole point. I still have agency as an individual and thinking about how I can respond to the situation. There's always an action that I can take. And even if it feels like if this thing happens, I might be backed into a corner, there's an action that I can, there's always something I can try. And I think at the start, I didn't fully believe that or have enough muscle in navigating uncertain things, which, a lot of makes sense given that I had spent, I went to school, I went to college, I went to a pretty structured consulting work environment. And then I went back to school. So I think that intuitively makes sense. But looking at the unknown, and there's a degree of unknown and ambiguity in change, is something still that's, can be very intimidating. But so thank you for that question.
And is there something that got your mind thinking in a different way that empowered you to give you that sense of centeredness and confidence? Was it the years that went by, the hurdles that you leaped over or went around or went under that gave you a stronger sense of confidence? There's a lot of people who are going to listen to this that are or joining now who are starting their careers. There's leaders who want to be better leaders. But wherever they are in their life professional work, there's going to be sort of the next thing or the next environment. What was it for you that got you powered to keep moving forward?
I think it was two things. Firstly, challenging experiences themselves. Getting through challenging experiences and exposing yourself, taking sufficient risks so that you have those types of challenging experiences, I will say, presented those opportunities for me to have growth. Some of them you can't predict, right? So the pandemic taking place a month before we were supposed to launch Medley as an in-person coaching community. Couldn't have predicted that. Ultimately had to shift the business. Thinking of starting a fundraise process, actually, and then SVB Bank collapsing. Did not predict that one. It was not on my bingo card. I don't think it was on anyone's bingo card.
And for those that are not close to this reality of financings for small businesses or startups specifically, SVB, what was that?
It was the bank that many venture capital firms and startups, including Medley, bank with and still do bank with. But it really presented a shock to the ecosystem where the venture funding market essentially shut down for a series of months. And since I would say has recovered, but if you're kicking off a process, it's not the best timing. So yeah, I mean, just putting myself in those situations, even if I don't know at the time that it's going to be that type of learning moment, is the first thing. And then the second piece, which I think anybody can and should act on, is really being intentional about your growth. Like it is a priority for me. I surround myself with my own medleys of people who I can learn and grow with on a very consistent weekly, monthly basis. And it looks like different things at different forms. I've done a lot of work, both formal types of work, whether it might be working with a coach, working in a group, working with a group of other founders. I was in a group for 3 years and it was really transformative. Working with a therapist, also all those things have been really helpful.
Are you going to mention your extraordinary? Are you going to mention your extraordinary co-founder?
People in my orbit and family, okay, like an extraordinary co-founder and mother, who I get to learn from every day. Yep, acknowledging it. Absolutely, that counts. My husband, I learn a lot from. I have friends and extended family who are incredibly brilliant, mentors. I really, really have learned so much from the people that I surround myself with. And that's something that anyone can take, no matter where they are in their career, as something that they can take away, and something that I've seen as well from people who are later stage in their careers. Something I've even seen with you, Mom, is like, oh, I said Mom in the interview. That's unusual. But you are very intentional as well about surrounding yourself with people who you can learn from and learn with. And that's, I think, just something that has been truly instrumental in helping me build my muscle around change, but also growing more generally as a leader over the past few years.
Thank you for sharing that, Jordan. I want to ask a question about this blended existence that we're all living in, and particularly as a co-founder, but also someone who has broad priorities in life. You mentioned your husbands, your friends are super important to you, family, formal and informal people who have become like family. Have you been able to create boundaries around, your brain and your time spent focusing on work versus yourself as a human versus your relationships that really matter?
Yes. And I think I'm going to have a whole new level of boundary testing because I'm about to become a parent, which is exciting life transition. And so we'll see how that goes. But
So she jumps also off the call. She's talking about any day now, just so you know.
I think this has also been an area for growth and an ongoing challenge, and something that I've accepted and also really learned from you is that balance doesn't mean that every day is a 50-50 day. That's not possible. It's not realistic. And it's going to be stressful if that's the goal and the bar that we're shooting for. Instead, I think of it as something that really ebbs and flows on days, weeks, months, and even years. And there's periods where there's stretches where I'm really leaning in to, because a lot of things that we have to troubleshoot at Medley, or my husband, who's also an entrepreneur, it really needs to lean in, and we support each other. We go back and forth. I will say I have had to accept that in building a business, and even just in work in general, there is no such thing as a finite to-do list. The list will only continue to extend. And if I can't find a way to operate in a sustainable way, that's actually at the cost of the business. And if I burn out and if I can't continue to push the way that I want to push, it's not going to work. And so I think that's been a big learning for me, is in recognizing, there's periods where I really need to push, and there's periods where I really need to recharge. And even this past winter was one of those periods where, I had a lot happening on the personal side. Medley in the fall was incredibly busy. We were excited to be renewing with several key customers that we had. We're onboarding new team members. And I had this vision where I was going to use, the stretch between Christmas and New Year's to get caught up. I don't know what I think getting caught up actually means, because that's not actually possible. But I had this moment, and I think we had this conversation, and you were like, I think you just need to sign off.
Yes.
I think you just need.
But to tell you the truth, yes, to tell you the truth, Jordan, I've learned that from you. And I've learned that from from our colleagues at Medley, because I'm not good at that. I'm not good at the sign off concept. And, it's been a long 6 years since I left a large, organization, complicated, intense place like Goldman Sachs, but I still am on a lot. And I have really admired and respected you and others on the team and others throughout the various Medleys that I live in, who say, you know what, I'm going to prioritize me. I'm going to prioritize relationships, and I'm going to make sure that I have a balance. And you made the point, and I think it's a really critical point, that enables you to be more on when you're on. Because
Absolutely.
everybody is human and everybody needs that recharge. I'm going to switch gears really quickly because of the way you think about technology and analytics. You have a great perspective and a lens for those things. We spend a lot of time as a society talking about AI and large language models, and the impact on work and in life, et cetera. How do you think about that in the context of our business, which is a human-centric business leveraging technology? Share your thoughts on this framework. Big question for a minute, but let's give it a shot.
Well, I think it ties back to what I brought up in terms of broader trends and what we're seeing and how the way we work is shifting very dramatically, right? Because I think, and it's obvious that AI is going to change the way people work across every industry, across every level of seniority. Jobs in, give or take, anywhere between 5 and 15, 20 years, depending on who you ask, they're going to take very different forms. And something that is fascinating is that many of our partners, and even in line with my personal perspective, believe that as our roles shift, the roles of leaders are also going to need to shift. And so it goes back to what we were also discussing in terms of essential human skills and commercial skills and the ability to connect with others and understand yourself. Our partners are really seeing that as still being particularly important because the rate of change is accelerating as a result of technology. And so, I think there's a broader optimistic view. There's a broader, more pessimistic view. I would say where I see Medley and where I see at least sort of my own continued growth and development, I think that there's certainly the potential for AI and for tech more generally to enable more present communication with people, more investment in the complex and nuanced types of communication that need to happen between humans, more emphasis on relationships. If you imagine, is there going to be a Fortune 500 company run by an AI CEO? I view relationships actually being as a huge blocker to that because the CEO is engaging with the board. They're engaging with other CEOs. They're engaging with their leadership team. It's not just, oh, I think this is the strategy. Let me press a red button and go. And so, I think I probably see things from a perspective of what this opportunity could unlock. I'm continuing to invest and learn myself in terms of how I can engage. But I think the exciting part is, any team is going to need to work really closely together and operate and communicate as effectively as possible. And at least on the Medley side, as we navigate our own changing dynamic and changing world, I feel excited and energized by the team that we've built. I saw a couple of comments in the chat from Emma and Michelle on our and Dominique and Abigail, incredible colleagues and coaches that we get to work with. So I'm excited about it on that front.
Well, I think it's a great place to conclude. First of all, Jordan, it is important for me to say how extraordinary this journey has been. 6 years. It seems like it was yesterday. I'm at that age where we sit around with my friends and talk about how time flies. Well, it certainly has, and it certainly has with Medley. But when you look at how much you have impacted our colleagues and our partners and our members through your commitment, perseverance, and just due diligence of what extraordinary would look like for our customers, it certainly did not happen overnight. It certainly was not a straight line. And to live your life and to thrive in life and at work at the same time is something that I'm extraordinarily excited to see. I learn from you every single day. Sometimes you could be a little nicer, but that's okay. I get the dynamic. But never, ever do you hesitate. And I am so much the better for it to say, you know what? I don't think you're thinking about this the right way. That's how I learn. That's how we all grow. Thank you, Jordan, for prioritizing this Medley Moments in the days before you go out to start the next phase of your life as a parent and as a mother. Much appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.